more from that later. I want to move on swiftly, if I may, and introduce you to our second speaker this morning, Father Jonathan Stewart. He's parish priest of All Saints Parish. And I know he needs little introduction to you, but I'd like to welcome him and to us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure of the parish boundaries, but we might actually be in my parish. I'm not sure. It's quite interesting. So there will be a collection during the second talk. Thank you very much. I think if I press that, then it will work. Again. And again? Perfect. That's perfect. Thank you, Jonathan, very much. I'm listening to the first talk from Bishop Kieran and then those videos. I thought, wouldn't it be lovely? I don't want to tell you what I've got on my slides. I just want to respond to all that. There's so much there, isn't there? I have a question for you, and it's a question which I've seen those videos 3 times now, and there's more to come during the day. But I have a question for you, which is a question that goes on in my mind, is how do I respond to those people in those videos? I have to tell you straight up front, my favourite is the little boy eating the chips with his hood up, because he reminds me of David. And the one I find really challenging is the guy with the hat and the scarf. Yes. Oh, just you wait. Just you wait. Now, the thing is that how does he look at them? He looks at them and loves them. He looks at them and sees opportunity. He looks at them and sees beyond all their prejudice, all their difficulties, all the challenges that they faced. And he sees the core of them and he loves them. And I believe that's what we're called to do. And actually, I don't know what's going to happen to this day, but if you go away thinking of that, then I'll be delighted. You can go away and think of the things that Bishop Kieran wants you to think of as well, and that's wonderful. But try and hold that. When you see them again, and you will, when he comes on with his hat, he was in America, that's not good. When he comes on again, love him. And see what happens. Okay, we're going to talk about evangelisation. It is a long word. I don't know how many letters it has, and it's difficult to conceive of what it is. But I want to say some things before we begin to speak about it. And they're things that I think that we as Catholics perhaps have particular problems with. Well, a couple of things as Catholics that we have problems, and then a couple of things just as people that we have a problem with. And the first is this. Okay, the first statement comes from the Lineamenta, which is the first initial document that is sent out before a synod of bishops. It's to get everybody talking about the subject, and that's what it said. By now, the subject of the new evangelisation is well known in our local churches, not in Teignmouth. We're still doing the bottom statement, and from the reaction, it sounds like that might be your experience too. Yeah. So there's a discrepancy, before we begin speaking about what we're going to do about it, there's a discrepancy in what we actually see as the important things in life. The church sees it as well established and we're moving forward. And that's great, isn't it? But actually we're all saying, oh, I'm really sorry, but this is my seat. Oh, I just remembered something. Bishop Kieran talked about the commodification of leisure. There's nothing new. I talked to the lady while we were having coffee, and she said there has been a race course on this site for 600 years. We have been commodifying leisure and everything else for 600 years. Anyway, that's the first problem. The second is this. The great thing is, we have people in our society called evangelicals. They call themselves evangelicals, we call them evangelicals. So the great thing is, they can do the evangelizing, and we can carry on being Catholics. Because that's what we've always been, it's what we like being, and it means we don't really have to do that because somebody else is doing it. The problem is when they do it, they say, oh, I wouldn't do it like that. I'd do it completely differently. I went to Celebrate recently in Torquay, which was fantastic, and I had the most wonderful weekend. but I still couldn't do that. I will. I still could. Tried it once, and somebody said I thought I was ordering a cup of tea, but don't do it in the restaurant. Doing it during the prayer and praise. Okay, that's the important thing. But that's the second problem. The third is this. Black is the new black. Okay, what's new? And it's around the word new. I think we get very nervous as human beings around the word new, because we're a bit worried about whether it really is new, okay? I used to be a graphic designer, and one of the jobs I did was, I can't believe I'm going to tell you this, was redesign men's toiletries for BHS. Top job. We did a great job, and we took along the designs to show the buyers, the men's toiletries buyers. They're really interesting people. And we showed them the designs, and they were absolutely thrilled. And we had done a good job. They looked terrific. The stuff looked really good. And during the presentation, we were coming towards the end, and I heard the chief buyer, who was sitting on my left, say to his colleague, "This is fantastic," he said. "They've made that shampoo look absolutely beautiful, and actually it's rubbish." Now, I have to point out that probably goes for all major retailers. Okay? The problem is that we package things in a new way and say it's new. How many times have you gone to your local shop or something, or you've bought your regular magazine or your paper, and suddenly it has new on it, and you think, oh, what have they done? They've changed it. So we're really anxious and nervous about the word new, and it appears in what we're doing today. So we need to focus, first of all, on what actually evangelization is, and that's what it is. We're called to go out to the whole world to proclaim the good news. People often talk around vision and mission, especially in groups like dioceses and parishes. What's our mission? We need some vision. What are we supposed to be doing? This is what we're supposed to be doing, and it's what we have always supposed to have been doing. That is what we do. And it really is the whole world. It's not just a small group of people. My chunker has gone. What do you call these? Think about what you call your remote control. There it is. Thank you very much. It's the whole world, okay? And we're privileged to witness in society today gatherings of the whole world in the name of church, which is, it fills my heart with joy, and I'm sure it does yours as well. Evangelii Nunciandi, one of the first texts, church texts about the new evangelization, spoke of the task and mission of the church, which the vast and profound changes of the present-day society make all the more urgent. There is a sense of urgency. Bishop Kieran urged us to be patient, but at the same time there is an urgency. It's patient urgency, okay? I just made that up. Evangelizing is in fact the grace and vocation proper to the church, her deepest identity. We're here to evangelize. We're not here, we're here to have a nice time, and we are having one, but we are here to evangelize. And if we don't, then we might as well pack up and go home, because it's simply pointless. So we have to reevaluate everything we do in terms of this. Are we actually evangelizing? And I believe, and what we're going to do a little bit this morning, is we have to look deep into our hearts and be absolutely honest with one another. One of the great things about Kieran, and I'm sure he won't mind me telling you this, when I was a student at the seminary, for my 4th year pastoral placement, I went to the Catholic Media Office, of which he was director. And I used to sit in the office. I'm not really sure what I did, and I'm sure he doesn't know what I did, but we got through it. But I used to listen to him on the telephone, and he used to speak to journalists and all sorts of people, and I wasn't listening in, but you couldn't help hear him, but not hear him. And he spoke with clarity and honesty and openness and friendship to everybody he spoke to. And it was an inspiration. He's done that here to us today. And that's how we have to learn how to speak to everybody, one another other, particularly, and first and foremost. This is what the church calls it. They added a few words to make it even longer, so it's more difficult to remember and more difficult to type. It's actually called the New Evangelisation for the Transmission of the Gospel. If you want it to be even longer, you can call it Good News. You get an extra word. So what's actually new about this new evangelisation? I put a few flashes in there so you'd be nice and nervous. John Paul II, when he was speaking to the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Latin America, said these words. And he said, "It will only have full significance if, as bishops with your priests and faithful, we're here today, you accept it as your commitment, a commitment not of re-evangelisation, but rather of a new evangelisation, new in its ardour, methods and expression." We're still going out to the whole world proclaiming the good news, but we are doing it with renewed ardour, with renewed methods, and with a renewed expression. And this is, well, not the beginning, but the continuation of that exploration for ourselves as a group of people who we call a diocese, so that we can do that for the world. The Lineamenta document says the new evangelisation is not a matter of redoing something which somehow failed in the past or didn't quite work. So we've got to say, well, what are we going to do now? As if it was an implicit judgment on the failure. No, it's the new evangelisation takes it up again. It actually lifts it up. It doesn't take it up. It doesn't just repeat the past. It's the courage to forge new paths. Courage. It takes real courage. And it's not easy to find that in ourselves, because we're responding to the circumstances of the world. We must never forgo a sense of boldness, in proclaiming the gospel, because that's where we need to dialogue with the world, where people's deepest expectations and their thirst for God can be discussed. People want to talk about these things, and we have to be available and give them the right conditions to enable them to talk about the thirst that they have in their lives for renewal and for grace and for peace. But if we're going to do it, the church says to us, first of all, we have to do a bit of self-evaluation and purification. I obviously do that every morning. And you probably do too, but we're going to do some of that now as an exercise. And we're going to look at those first three elements: fear, weariness, and confusion. Now, I know that none of you are frightened, none of you are tired, and certainly none of you are confused at all. But there might be a few of us amongst this group who are, and so we're going to give them a chance to speak. And the first of those is fear. I talked a little bit about fear at the Celebrate conference, and somebody very kindly wrote and said that they were pleased that a priest had spoken about fear. I could write a book. But we're not supposed to be fearful, are we? We're not supposed to be frightened. We're supposed to be confident. We're supposed to know what we're talking about. And we're supposed to be excited about the mission that we're on. But actually, I think lots of us are quite frightened. And the great thing is, there's nothing new in that. In the evening of the same day, the first day of the week, the doors were closed in the room where the disciples were for fear of the Jews. The moment when the mission began, at the moment when the church was expected to go and change the world, what did the disciples do? They ran back to where they'd been before and locked the doors. They were terrified. They thought the same thing was going to happen to them. They were running away. And it's good for us to remember that in the Gospels we have the story of those first evangelizers who didn't go out filled with vim and vigor and ready to speak. They were terrified. This beautiful painting by Giotto, well, it's attributed to Giotto, but I would also attribute it to him, is a magnificent image of this moment. Of course, Giotto has this lovely device of pulling the wall down so we can see into the room, and the Holy Spirit has already arrived because we can see the tongues of fire. But look at the two guys outside looking in, the two servants. They're a bit like the innkeeper in the Caravaggio, which we saw in Kieran's talk. They're listening and they're outside, but they know that something's going on. When those doors burst open and these disciples emerge, those are the first people they will speak to. But everything we do is born out of fear. Fear is, in a sense, the first emotion that's experienced in the transmission of the gospel, and it's good for us to remember that. The Lord says to us, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God still and trust in me." He knows that we are frightened. He knows that our hearts are troubled, but he calls us back to him, just as Pope Francis is doing beautifully, reminding us that all we need to do is go back to Christ and gaze on him. So what makes you fearful? Try and find something. There must be something deep down that you're frightened of. And I'd like you just to think about that and then just spend a couple of minutes talking to your neighbour about your fears. Your worst fears, your nightmares, or things that just trouble your spirit. Just for a couple of minutes. Okay, I wonder if I could ask you to, it's lovely to hear you talking, thank you. Splendid. No, I won't say shush. No, it's all right. People will come. People will come back in their own good time. I won't say shush because they say shh in Lourdes at the grotto. Oh, it's horrid. I don't like it. This horrible voice comes over going shh. It's not nice. Oh, there we are, but it works. I'll do it all the time now. We've got lots more to talk about. So I wonder if maybe 3 people could say what they heard the other person, because obviously you're not frightened yourself, but the person next to you is terrified. Just what they said. Maybe just 3 people of things that you're frightened of. Yes? Okay, so she's a highly qualified nurse with a very responsible job, and every morning there's a fear that everything will go well. Huge amount of responsibility, huge trust placed in her hands, and is she going to get that right? That makes for enormous fear. Thank you very much. Yes, Liz. A fear of failure and a fear of not looking stupid. Of looking stupid, yes. Yeah. You look great. Come up here, then you'll look stupid. Yes, a fear of failure and a fear of not looking stupid. That's enormous. It really is. And we look most stupid when we expose ourselves, or when we are exposed, then people start to say, oh, look, you know, anything. We're very vulnerable. One more. Yes, one over there. Yes, Nick. Fear of our past being brought into the public arena. So somebody, sorry? Especially when we're here. Somebody finding out and revealing. Yes. Yeah, that's a fear I have. Sometimes I'm preaching on a Sunday morning and I think somebody's going to come up and say, actually, Jonathan, we didn't want you to do this. You just come away with us now. I say, but I like it. I enjoy it. Somebody will find me out. You know, there's this fear of being found out, because sometimes it just feels a bit like, you know, why am I doing this and how am I doing this? It's extraordinary. So there's lots of fear going on in us. Great. Think about those things and share them during the rest of the day. We're going to move on. What happened was that Jesus came amongst them and said, peace be with you. He offered them peace. So his presence brought peace. He understood the fear that they were experiencing, and he brought them peace. And in another of Caravaggio's paintings, he depicts this moment where Thomas is brought into the frame. Thomas, who's been outside, doubting Thomas, he's known as, yes? Or Caravaggio calls it the incredulity of St. Thomas. I think that's much nicer. Doubting Thomas. I think Thomas was frightened. Thomas was afraid. Thomas wasn't there when the others had been given the gift of seeing Jesus the first time. He was isolated. That makes us very frightened. So he doubts, yes, but he's also afraid. And we are afraid, and then we doubt. It leads to doubt. Look what Caravaggio does with doubt. He paints it onto the brows, good word, brow, onto the brows of his disciples. And look at those furrowed brows. And Jesus takes Thomas's hand. The first thing is that he comes into their presence wounded and vulnerable. He doesn't come glorified and magnificent, but wounded, and he shows them his hands and his feet. He says, look, I too am wounded. I too am vulnerable, and I made myself vulnerable. Henry Nouwen's beautiful book, The Wounded Healer, says that we can only begin to be healers if we accept our own wounds. That's what Jesus does. And then he takes Thomas's hand and pushes it into his wound. He doesn't say, go on, you do it. He says, I know you won't do it. Give me your hand and I'll take it and put it into my wound. Feel that. The fleshiness, the flap of Jesus' skin lifts. Just as the sword that pierced his side lifted that skin, so now Thomas's finger lifts the skin in the same way and enters the wound, not now to bring death, but to bring life, not to Jesus, but to his disciples. And Jesus draws Thomas from darkness into light, pulls him from darkness to light, from doubt to faith, and from poverty. See the rip in Thomas's jerkin, from poverty to richness. With Jesus, we can achieve everything. It was lovely that we had that text in our morning prayer today. Highly, highly appropriate. God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. I'm really good at the first two, not very good at the third. It's always good to have a picture of a tired cat halfway through the talk because everybody goes, "Aww." It's a tip for speakers. Okay, again, it's nothing new. Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. They replied, we'll come with you, full of enthusiasm. They went out and got into the boat and caught nothing that night. That makes you very, very tired. Also good to have a picture of a small child halfway through the talk. So you might know what that feels like. Fishing all night and catching nothing. Setting out with hearts filled with passion and ardour and desire, and nothing happens. I get weary every September when I have to think about gearing up for things like sacramental preparation. And I'm not very good at getting that geared up. Because I think, oh, here we go again. How are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? Who's going to come? Will they stay? Will we be able to pass on the message to them? It's tiring sometimes. And if you're catechists, you'll know what that feels like. It's hard if you're a parent getting up in the morning and getting your children ready for school. That's exhausting, I can imagine. I've witnessed it. So there are lots of things in our lives that make us weary. But it's nothing new, and he understands that and says, "Come to me, all you who labour and are overburdened, and I will give you rest." He doesn't just mean I'll let you have some leisure. He gives us complete and utter rest, pure rest. So here we go again, okay? What makes you weary? And don't say fear, because that's a cop-out. It does make you weary, but try and think of something else, just for a couple of minutes. It really does work. Wow, it does work. Thank you. Cool, you're a good crowd. Okay, three different people about what makes you weary. Yes, Stella. Difficult problems that are never resolvable. Yes. Insoluble. Yes, insoluble. That's really hard, isn't it? So a problem that, because what we want to do is we want to solve it, and we spend a lot of time trying to solve it, even though we know that it's probably insoluble. And that's tough and exhausting, but we carry on doing it. Yes? Disappointment, yes. Disappointment. Hoping, setting out, and it not working out. Yeah, it is weird. And what it does is it stops us trying anymore, doesn't it? When we've been been disappointed enough times, we simply don't bother anymore. Absolutely. One more, yes, please. Okay. Simply too much to do. Yeah. We live busy lives, and there's always something else to do. Absolutely. And there's a whole range of other things which you've discussed, and those things make us incredibly weary. What does the Lord offer in terms of, well, first of all, let's remember that they got tired too. They were exhausted. Fear, grief, anxiety, tension, perhaps a little bit too much to do, and they couldn't even stay awake 1 hour. We're hoping that you'll stay awake until at least 3:30, or at least until lunchtime. You can go and have a kip at lunchtime. Jesus said to them when they'd been fishing all night, "Throw the net out to starboard and you will find something." Okay? He told them to try something new. He didn't say, thank God, oh, go out and keep doing it. Just go out and do it again. Go out and do it again and you'll find something. And if you don't find anything that night, go out and try it again. He said, do something new. And the wonderful thing that he said was, not just take the net up like this and just chuck it out to the other side. He said, completely overhaul the way you manage fishing. He did. Change the system. Yesterday we talked about this, and wonderfully one of the priests who is a sailor said that actually the origin of the word starboard comes from the steerboard, because it was on that side that the steering took place. Now, if you've got a system for steering on the right-hand side of the boat, it means you fish out of the left, because that's where the nets go. It's the obvious place. If you have to change that system, you have to completely overhaul the way you fish. The boat has to go in a different direction. You have to have men who are used to pulling in nets from the left-hand side of the boat to start and be trained to do that. It's not just, oh, let's just do this. Oh, look, fish. It's let's radically overhaul everything, and then everything changes. So that option to try something new is given to us. Three, just because I like paintings, but three very different paintings of the same moment, the miraculous draught of fishes. First by Raphael. And what I want to draw your attention to are the apostles on the right-hand side. It's hard work pulling in fish. Look at the strength in their shoulders and arms. They're leaning down into the water and heaving up those nets. Remember that there were too many fish for them to have in their boat, so somebody else had to come and help them. This is tough work. It's not like reeling in a mackerel. Mackerel are easy. Throw out the line, pull in the mackerel. Throw out the line, pull in the mackerel. I don't know whether it's because they're stupid or they're just very giving. This is hard work, okay? And Raphael expresses it beautifully. James Tissot expresses it in a slightly different way. And what I love about this painting is the way the three apostles are in the boat with the fish. Okay, Pope Francis has called us to be smelling of sheep. I'm telling you, you need to smell of fish. Okay, we had fish sandwiches for lunch yesterday. There was quite a pong in the room afterwards. We've got to be there pulling in those fish. These men are engaged in that ministry and that mission, and it's very, very powerful. And the third one, which is my favourite, is John Riley's painting of the same painting. For these apostles, fishing is effortless. Why? Because it's all gift. Everything comes to them from Christ. The fish are sent from Christ directly to the apostles. All they have to do is be in the right place to receive that miraculous catch. And look at that beautiful cyclical movement. It's a movement of power and energy radiating from the light at the center of that painting. It's a magnificent depiction of what we're involved in. And I believe it speaks to us of the hope that we could have of how our church and our ministry and our mission could actually be. Excuse me. Now, none of you are confused about church teaching or your ministry or the church's position in the world or anything like that, I know. But we're going to have a little look about confusion. And again, we're going to root ourselves in the gospel. Philip said, Lord, show us the Father, and then we shall be satisfied. And Jesus said to him, have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me? What we don't get is the expression in Christ's voice, do we, in the Gospels? So we can read them in a sense anyway. But there has to be a little bit of frustration in Jesus' voice. I really have been trying to explain this to you, Philip. I really have. I've done my best, and you still don't understand. But it can also, there's a lot of compassion in it as well. But Philip was confused, and he wasn't the only one. This is Duccio's depiction of the last discourse in St. John's Gospel, and it's from the Meister in Siena. It's the altarpiece, the great altarpiece, which depicts the life of Jesus in small panels. These are it's ridiculous that we can do this with them because they're tiny panels about a foot square, hugely blown up. But look at the confusion in the apostles' faces. Look at this sitting, I grew a beard so I could stroke it and go like that and look terribly wise. Yes, I'm pondering. But these guys, look at this. There's another furrowed brow. This time it's confusion rather than, he's here, this furrowed brow here. This time it's confusion rather than fear or doubt. And there's another lovely one which is even more like that. There's, I don't know what he's doing. What's he doing? Real scratching of the head. Yeah, I don't know what is happening here. And look at this. Look, more beard rubbing. Yeah, that's why the apostles had beards, to rub their beards. But what I love about this is, there was a self-help book years ago called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Okay? Oh, you all read it? Yeah? I didn't need to. But what they're doing is they're getting ready to have their feet washed. So they don't know what he's doing, and yet they're moving forward. So they're courageous enough and they know enough to be able to be engaged in the mission. And it's not the depiction of the great moment when the giant spiders took over the upper room. They are sandals. Okay. Sandals. At the moment, you don't know what I'm doing, but you will understand. In time, you will understand. That's when we need patience, because we don't understand. We don't know fully. So we need patience, but he promises us that we will understand. But we're not engaged in a situation where we say, give me the facts, tell me what I need to do, and then I'll do it. Give me all the information. That's not the mission that we're involved in. We go ahead trying to understand as a community of love. So last time this morning, just a couple of minutes on what makes you confused. Keep it short. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we've only got time for two. Okay, so two hands, if any. Yes. Technology. Yeah. Thank you. Enough said. There's one right at the back. Church jargon, yes. Yeah. What about school jargon? Wow. All those initials for things. Gosh. I'm constantly saying to my head teacher, sorry, what does that stand for? Church jargon, absolutely. We need a simpler language, yes. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So lots of things confuse us, and we can talk about those for the rest of our lives, probably. Okay. Johnny Depp said I pretty much try to stay in a constant state of confusion just because of the expression it leaves on my face. Oh. It's great, try it. It's really nice. Okay. Lord, we don't know where you're going, So how can we know the way? It's a great question. It's a wonderful question. It's a question we ask constantly. Thank goodness it's used so much in funeral liturgies, because it's at that moment very often that we simply don't know what's happening. And Thomas expresses that beautifully for us, and in a sense validates our question and allows us to ask it as well, I think, which is really important. And the response is, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Don't look for anywhere else, don't look for anybody else, but follow me. That's what we are called to do. Not to go off on our own paths, not to go off on our own roads, not to forge new paths that we've made up that we think is going to be the right way to do things, but together, called by the Lord, commissioned by the Lord, and sent out to transform the world. So in the face of fear, weariness, and confusion, we're called not to run away, not to hide, but to be bolder, to be emboldened so that we can go out and do what we're called to do. Because there's no doubt that the effort to do this, to proclaim the gospel to the people of today, who are buoyed up by hope, but at the same time often oppressed by fear and distress, is a service rendered to the Christian community, of course, and also to the whole of humanity. We are changing the world, not the church. So, 3 questions which you will find on page 13 of your booklet, and you can ponder during the rest of the day. In what ways does fear hinder you passing on the faith? How does it stop you evangelizing because you are frightened? The second question is, how does weariness affect your ministry? Clearly it doesn't affect mine, but it might affect yours, and it would be interesting to examine that for yourselves. And the third question is, how could your confusion be confusing others? The problem with our confusion is that we pass it on. We don't try to be not confused and then speak. We speak out of our confusion, and that simply confuses everybody else. Thank you very much.
I just sit there feeling excited about the faith that I have, and I hope you do too. And thank you. There's more coming, and we'll have the pleasure of listening to Jonathan this afternoon. It's almost lunchtime. You're only 10 minutes away from a sandwich. We're going to show you the second of 4 sets of video clips now. This is 5 minutes. We didn't just go out onto the streets. Our team of intrepid interviewers didn't just confine their attentions to the streets. Here's a few answers to the question, how do you talk to others about your faith? Have a little look at this wrestling with the question that we're wrestling with today, and see what you think if they'd have been asking you.
Yes, I do, yes. At first I found it quite difficult, but now, lately, I've found it easier, and I use a tool, the Alpha course. And we've had several Alpha courses at home, one in the rugby club. So I find it a lot easier to talk to people about Jesus.
I'm very careful. Yes, I do, when the situation arises. Yeah. I don't sort of home in and say, I think you ought to, believe in this. I tend to keep it to people that I know as well.
I always talk to people about my faith, whether they're Catholic, Christian or no faith. I have plenty of friends that are of no faith, and I always talk to them about what I do and about Celebrate, actually.
I do talk to others about my faith. I think often it's a case of waiting for the right moment. It's certainly a case of being the right person at the right time. And I think if we get to the stage where we are loving a person, it's not so hard.
I don't deliberately go and talk about my beliefs, but I do love talking about my beliefs when I'm in conversation about it.
Some others, some not.
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes. Gently, I think, rather than going in all guns blazing. What about you, Frank?
Yeah, I've got some friends who I grew up with who are Catholic but lapsed, and I sometimes talk to them about it, but I don't. They know that I am not lapsed and I still go to church, but it is a bit. I don't feel comfortable, I suppose, bringing it up. It's more if it comes up in conversation for me.
I would hesitate in sometimes talking all the time about my faith, because I think there's a kind of expectation there that being a priest, that's what I'm going to be doing all the time. And, sometimes you just want to talk about ordinary things, like particularly family things or work or what other people are doing.
I do sometimes. Probably if there's a conversation already going on, I may not instigate it, but certainly if people ask me about it, then I'm quite happy to share. So yes, I do. But I suppose most of the time it's with other Christian friends.
Yeah. It can be difficult to, I don't know, maybe it's fear again that you're just going to say something wrong. So sometimes probably I don't always share my faith as much as I should, because I'm scared of the reaction.
We're not always convinced ourselves, are we? We believe, but we do wonder sometimes where he is in our belief.
Yeah.
I do sometimes, but it's kind of hard when it's your friends, especially if they're not Catholic, because they don't understand.
Very varied in terms of sharing beliefs with people outside of the church environment, especially if I've got my collar on, I'm maybe out in town, house or whatever. Because people, as soon as they see the collar, think, oh, if he speaks, he's going to speak about God, and sometimes people can feel a little bit, but other times when you just can enter into a conversation and just weave in little things.
And I do wear a collar now more than what I used to in the past, and I've noticed that if I wear a collar, it's remarkable how often people come up and speak to you about sort of spiritual things or things going on in their family, or would you pray for such and such a person?
Well, it depends really, because sometimes I have these friends which really listen to me, and then there are some people which I just don't really get along with, and if there are people that really listen to me, I only sometimes talk about my faith when it's right, and the others just don't listen to me and are horrible to me because I'm a Christian.
I don't know if it's just because I'm getting a bit older, but because when I was younger I probably would share my faith a lot more openly, or if it's the current climate that, particularly for me as being a Catholic, there just seems like a lot of assumptions and prejudices as soon as you say you're Catholic, and so I think I've kind of been aware of that and kind of the tirade of accusations that are going to come my way, so maybe I've been a bit more tentative than I was about openly kind of talking about my faith immediately with someone new.
And if somebody asks me a question about my faith or why I go to church, I'm quite happy to answer them, but it doesn't become a sermon.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've got grown-up children and they would not appreciate that.
I do. In fact, I told everybody at the office yesterday that I was coming to celebrate today.
Why did you say that?
Just to gently spread the word without pushing it down people's throats, not sounding like I'm preaching to them or witnessing to them, but just to deliberately being natural about it and letting people know that, hey, there is a Catholic in the office and he enjoys being a Catholic and he's looking forward to the weekend, and I kind of hope that it makes people think a little bit and start asking some questions themselves later on. So.
I've recently started talking more about my faith, and I found it really interesting because it just opens up so many more doors that people don't usually explore, and I found it really actually helpful for myself as well.
We've got a lot to talk to each other about, haven't we? That's why lunchtime isn't really a break. Do you know what I'm saying to you? This is not the jolly moment. We want you to talk about these questions. Talk about what's occurring to you. Say to somebody what you're feeling. Say to somebody what you're thinking. These are fresh thoughts for us, inspired by two wonderful speakers and a lot of input. We want you to think about what would this day look like if it was happening in your parish. We want you to think about your conversations at work, about what excites you. This is not about doing new things, it's about doing what we already do differently. It's exciting because it's courageous. Father Jonathan yesterday gave those 2 talks to 70 clergy in here. Let me tell you, that took courage. Because that's his peer group. All right, sometimes the hardest place to evangelize is our homes. So we've got a lot to wrestle with. A couple of points before Sarah leads us in our grace. And I'm just saying that so that she knows she's going to lead us in our grace. Just a couple of things very quickly. Along that wall, a couple of years ago with Father John Deeney, who you saw on the screens there, we prepared a series of cards, the How to Boil an Egg version of Catholicism. Not a complex catechism, so much as a series of simple cards to help families, perhaps parents, understand why we make the sign of the cross. They're there to take away. If you know anybody you could give them to. You don't need to take one, you could take 12 or 20, but you must take ones you'll give away. Don't take them and not use them. Another way to evangelize is to put some money in that bucket that says Typhoon. Many of you will be doing that anyway, but Simon Jarkey, who is here somewhere, has set up a place there if any of you want to do that. And finally, a couple of tips. There are 261 of us. And so we've got 45 minutes for lunch. It's prepared and ready for you. Just a couple of things. Can I just ask you, in the spirit of human loveliness, that when you get in your food, you have your chat away from getting the food, just so that the queue doesn't build up behind you. Although it will, but not for long. Be patient and yet urgent. And lastly, please, if you, there are plenty of seating in the furthest room. For those of you who are fit and prefer a little bit of a stretch, the first room here, both rooms have food set out in them. But if you prefer to stand and eat, go into the first room and the tables are laid out there for you. If you prefer to sit down, there's plenty of space in the corridor or further along where you had tea and coffee. And now, keeping the questions in your head for your sandwiches, I invite Sarah to come and lead us in prayer.